You wake up, drink coffee, and feel alert, but that alertness is not real energy. What you experience is a neurological illusion, a temporary suspension of fatigue, not genuine cellular restoration. Inside your brain, a molecule called adenosine slowly accumulates, measuring every waking moment like falling sand. Adenosine binds to its receptors and whispers a biological truth your nervous system cannot ignore. You are tired, and the system demands rest, repair, and metabolic housekeeping for survival. Coffee does not remove adenosine. Caffeine simply impersonates it, blocking receptors like a counterfeit key. Harvard neuroscientists have described this as borrowed alertness, achieved by silencing the brain's fatigue alarms. The debt still exists, silently compounding, even while you feel sharp, fast, and productive. When caffeine leaves the bloodstream hours later, adenosine floods back, reclaiming every blocked receptor simultaneously. This is the afternoon crash, not weakness, but biology, collecting what you already owe. Now here is where Matcha quietly changes the plot without triggering neurological alarms inside. Matcha contains caffeine too, but it arrives bound to L-Theanine, an ancient amino acid. Stanford researchers have shown L-Theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and reshapes neural signaling rhythms. Instead of a spike, you get a slow-release current, smoothing stimulation into something sustainable. Adenosine is not suppressed violently. It is negotiated with, paced, and gradually respected again. This biochemical diplomacy prevents receptor pileups, reducing crashes while preserving genuine cognitive clarity long-term. Mayo Clinic researchers describe this as calm alertness, a state caffeine alone rarely sustains. You are not forcing wakefulness. You are cooperating with neurochemistry instead of overpowering it. This distinction matters because neurons remember stress, and repeated spikes teach them defensive patterns. Over time, borrowed energy trains your brain to expect assault, not balance or recovery. Matcha suggests another path, one aligned with evolutionary pacing rather than modern overstimulation cycles. In the next phase, the real cost appears, as withdrawal exposes how dependent regulation has become. The first 72 hours will not feel enlightened. They will feel personal and uncomfortable. But this discomfort is not punishment. It is your nervous system recalibrating ancient thresholds. And that recalibration is where the real experiment actually begins for your brain long-term health. What seems like a simple beverage choice is actually a vote for how neurons will age. Coffee shouts over fatigue, while matcha listens, then responds with restraint and timing built in. The difference will unfold cell by cell, long before you consciously notice clarity returning. The first morning without coffee does not feel like optimization. It feels like something meaningful is missing. Your head throbs dully, patience shortens, and concentration slips through your fingers unexpectedly fast. This is not weakness. It is your nervous system protesting a sudden removal of chemical certainty. For years, caffeine forced cerebral blood vessels into constriction, tightening flow to maintain artificial sharpness. NIH research confirms caffeine's vasoconstrictive effect as a primary mechanism behind perceived mental focus. When caffeine disappears, those vessels rebound, dilating rapidly, flooding sensitive tissues with pressure and pain. That pounding headache is cerebral vasodilation, announcing a long-delayed return to baseline circulation. At the same time, dopamine signaling drops, removing motivation's familiar spark from routine actions. Acetylcholine activity also falters, blurring memory recall and producing the infamous mental fog. Your brain feels slower because it is relearning how to regulate attention without external enforcement. This phase often feels emotional because coffee was never just chemistry, it was ritual and identity. The mug, the aroma, the pause before responsibility, all encoded safety into your mornings. Neuroscience calls this associative memory, where comfort binds tightly to predictable neurochemical rewards. Removing coffee removes certainty, and uncertainty is something the brain interprets as potential danger. Cortisol rises slightly, sharpening irritability, while patience erodes under even trivial friction. Here's the counterintuitive truth most people never hear during caffeine withdrawal discussions. That headache is good news, not because it hurts, but because receptors are resetting sensitivity. Harvard sleep researchers describe adenosine receptors as adaptive, reshaping responsiveness based on repeated exposure. Chronic caffeine dulls them, requiring higher stimulation just to feel normal again. Withdrawal reverses this numbness, restoring receptors to their original evolutionary calibration. You are not losing energy. You are regaining accurate perception of fatigue and recovery signals. This is what paying neurological debt feels like: uncomfortable, humbling, but ultimately stabilizing. Many people quit here, mistaking recalibration for damage, returning to caffeine prematurely. If you stop now, the system never finishes repairing its internal thresholds. Stanford behavioral studies link unresolved withdrawal cycles to long-term cortisol dysregulation patterns. That pattern quietly ages the brain, locking stress responses into default operating modes. Matcha softens this phase, not by avoiding withdrawal, but by lowering the shock amplitude. Its slow caffeine release reduces vascular rebound, while L-Theanine tempers stress signaling centrally. You still feel discomfort, but it becomes manageable, interpretable, and temporary rather than overwhelming. By the third morning, something subtle shifts before clarity fully returns. The headache loosens its grip, and mental noise quiets instead of screaming for stimulation. You are not energized yet, but you are no longer hijacked by urgency. This is the nervous system remembering how equilibrium feels without constant negotiation. And from this fragile neutrality, a different kind of alertness begins assembling itself quietly. Have you ever felt awake after coffee, yet strangely tense, restless, and internally overactivated? Your hands tremble slightly, your heart accelerates, and thoughts race without clear direction. This is not focus. This is your sympathetic nervous system gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Coffee achieves alertness by amplifying adrenaline, activating ancient fight-or-flight circuitry meant for survival threats. NIH neuroscience literature links caffeine-induced jitters to excessive sympathetic nervous system dominance. Your brain becomes vigilant, not intelligent, scanning for danger instead of building coherent thought chains. Matcha introduces a different protagonist into this neurological story: L-Theanine, subtle and strategic. L-Theanine crosses the blood-brain barrier and begins modulating excitatory signaling within minutes of ingestion. Stanford neurophysiology studies show L-Theanine increases alpha wave activity across cortical regions. Alpha waves appear during meditation, creative flow, and deep focus without emotional agitation. This state is not sleepy. It is alert without urgency, present without internal noise. Caffeine alone shouts, "Act now," while L-Theanine whispers, "Stay here and observe carefully." Together, they form a rare neurological balance modern environments rarely allow naturally anymore. Instead of adrenaline, GABA signaling increases, gently inhibiting excess neuronal firing patterns. Your mind feels spacious, not narrow, as attention stabilizes rather than oscillates wildly. This is why Matcha users describe clarity without crash, focus without emotional taxation afterward. The counterintuitive truth is that productivity improves when stimulation decreases, not when it intensifies. Evolution favored sustained attention for tracking environments, not frantic bursts of hyper-focus exhaustion. Coffee forces output by urgency. Matcha invites output by coherence and neural efficiency. After roughly 1 week, many people notice deeper work sessions without conscious effort. Time perception shifts, distractions fade, and tasks feel integrated rather than resisted internally. This is often called flow state, but biologically, it is regulated cortical synchrony. Mayo Clinic research associates alpha dominance with improved learning, memory consolidation, and emotional regulation. You are not working harder. You are working in alignment with neural architecture. Importantly, this calm alertness reduces cumulative stress signaling across weeks, not just hours. Lower cortisol exposure protects hippocampal neurons involved in memory and contextual reasoning. This protection compounds quietly, influencing how the brain ages under chronic cognitive demand. Coffee-driven focus burns fast and demands repayment. Matcha-driven focus amortizes gently over time. The difference reveals itself not in excitement, but in how little recovery you need afterward. And now, as mental calm stabilizes, another system begins responding unexpectedly. Your gut. Because cognition is never isolated, it is fed, buffered, and shaped by digestion itself. That connection becomes impossible to ignore once stimulation stops assaulting the stomach daily. For many people, coffee does not stop at the brain. It announces itself violently in the gut. Burning reflux, urgency, and cramping are often dismissed as normal morning side effects. But the stomach is not complaining randomly. It is responding to biochemical provocation. Coffee strongly stimulates gastrin, accelerating acid production and intestinal motility beyond physiological necessity. This creates rapid evacuation, mistaken for healthy digestion, but actually driven by irritation and stress signaling. Repeated daily stimulation trains the gut to expect assault, reducing tolerance and long-term mucosal resilience. Mayo Clinic gastroenterology research links chronic acid exposure to inflammation and barrier dysfunction. Matcha enters the digestive system with a fundamentally different chemical personality and behavioral footprint. Its lower acidity produces less gastric irritation, allowing stomach lining defenses to remain intact longer. More importantly, matcha contains high concentrations of polyphenols that interact directly with gut microbes. These polyphenols act as prebiotics, selectively feeding beneficial bacteria rather than indiscriminately stimulating motility. NIH microbiome studies associate polyphenol intake with increased bifidobacteria and reduced inflammatory markers. As microbial balance improves, gut signaling to the brain becomes calmer and more predictable. This matters because the gut produces neurotransmitter precursors influencing mood, focus, and stress resilience. Coffee-driven irritation disrupts this axis, amplifying anxiety and discomfort through neural feedback loops. Matcha gently stabilizes it, reducing sympathetic activation originating from gastrointestinal distress. Another compound quietly working here is EGCG, abundant in whole leaf green tea consumption. EGCG has demonstrated anti-inflammatory effects on intestinal epithelial cells in controlled laboratory studies. It supports mucosal repair while limiting excessive immune activation within the gut wall. The counterintuitive truth is that regular bowel urgency is not a sign of digestive health. It is a sign your system is being pushed to eject contents prematurely for self-protection. True digestive efficiency feels boring, predictable, and largely unnoticed during daily life. When stimulation decreases, digestion becomes rhythmic instead of reactive, conserving energy for repair. Many people notice reduced bloating, fewer cramps, and quieter mornings after several weeks. This shift is not dramatic. It is subtle, cumulative, and deeply biological in nature. Your gut stops bracing for impact and starts performing maintenance again. And when digestion stabilizes, another system quietly adjusts its priorities: metabolism and fat usage. Because energy management never exists in isolation from inflammation and stress signaling. That realization sets the stage for understanding matcha's misunderstood relationship with fat oxidation. Many people chase weight loss obsessively, yet remain trapped at stubborn plateaus despite disciplined routines. They reduce calories, increase exercise, and still feel betrayed by unresponsive metabolic systems. This frustration often drives reliance on stimulants, believing more push will unlock fat loss. Coffee amplifies energy expenditure briefly, but it does not fundamentally reprogram metabolic signaling pathways. Its effect relies heavily on stress hormones, which eventually provoke compensation and efficiency reduction. Matcha introduces a quieter influence through EGCG, a catechin concentrated in whole green tea leaves. EGCG interacts with enzymes regulating thermogenesis, subtly increasing fat oxidation under specific conditions. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition observed increased fat oxidation during light exercise. The increase averaged 17%, but only when combined with movement and caloric balance. This matters because EGCG is not forcing fat loss. It is enhancing metabolic responsiveness. Here is the counterintuitive truth that marketing rarely emphasizes clearly or responsibly. Matcha does nothing miraculous if energy intake remains excessive and insulin signaling stays chronically elevated. It acts as a catalyst, not a solution, nudging existing systems toward efficiency. Another crucial difference lies in how matcha is consumed compared to brewed coffee. With coffee, you drink an extract. With matcha, you ingest the entire leaf structure. This means fiber, chlorophyll, minerals, and antioxidants enter the bloodstream together as a matrix. That matrix slows absorption, reduces spikes, and supports steadier metabolic signaling throughout the day. Chlorophyll may assist detoxification pathways, indirectly reducing metabolic burden from environmental stressors. Fiber supports satiety, reducing unconscious overeating driven by blood sugar volatility later. None of this produces dramatic weekly transformations, and that is precisely the point. Sustainable metabolic change rarely announces itself with spectacle or immediate visual rewards. It reveals itself through steadier energy, fewer cravings, and less reliance on willpower. Mayo Clinic researchers consistently emphasize metabolic health over scale weight as primary success indicators. When inflammation decreases and stress hormones normalize, fat loss becomes possible rather than forced. Coffee-driven thermogenesis burns fast, then rebounds. Matcha-driven support compounds gradually over time. This is not exciting advice, but biology rarely rewards impatience or aggression. And before embracing matcha blindly, one final responsibility remains: understanding who should avoid it. Because optimization without safety awareness is just another form of biological ignorance. Before declaring matcha superior, one final reality demands respect. Not every healthy compound is universally safe. Optimization without biological context often creates new problems while pretending to solve old ones. Matcha contains exceptionally high levels of oxalates, compounds that bind calcium inside the kidneys. For individuals with calcium oxalate kidney stone history, this combination can be genuinely dangerous. NIH nephrology research confirms oxalates as a major contributor to recurrent kidney stone formation. Drinking powdered leaves concentrates exposure far beyond brewed green tea consumption levels. If you have experienced kidney stones before, matcha should not replace coffee casually or daily. Another invisible risk involves heavy metal accumulation, particularly lead contamination within tea leaves. Because matcha uses the entire leaf, contaminants are ingested rather than discarded during brewing. Studies analyzing tea crops show higher lead presence in leaves grown near industrialized soils. Ceremonial-grade matcha, sourced from Uji, Japan, consistently shows lower contamination risk profiles. Quality sourcing is not luxury here. It is a safety requirement with neurological implications. There is also iron absorption to consider, especially for individuals with borderline anemia. Tannins in green tea inhibit non-heme iron absorption when consumed near meals. Mayo Clinic guidance advises spacing tea consumption away from iron-rich foods intentionally. These cautions do not invalidate matcha's benefits. They contextualize them responsibly, Biology rewards discernment, not absolutism, especially when compounds act systemically over time. Now step back and reconsider the original question with clearer internal framing. 30 days without coffee is not a war against caffeine or cultural ritual. It is a temporary sabbatical for your adrenal system and neural receptors. Matcha offers a gentler stimulant architecture, not moral superiority or metabolic magic. The true benefit is not what you consume, but what you stop forcing constantly. When stimulation aligns with physiology, stress quiets, recovery improves, and clarity emerges naturally. Some people will thrive on matcha, others on moderated coffee, and many on strategic alternation. The body does not want purity. It wants rhythm, predictability, and respect for limits. Listen closely to headaches, digestion, sleep depth, and emotional reactivity during experimentation. Those signals are more trustworthy than trends, influencers, or productivity narratives. Health is not punishment for indulgence. It is inherited intelligence waiting for cooperation. Use moderation as protection, but use understanding as your primary survival tool. Because biology forgives ignorance slowly, but it rewards comprehension almost immediately.